Pandemic is easily one of my favorite developers. While sadly they no longer exist today, they have a long and rich history of creating very fun titles. They created everything from third-person open-world games to military strategy games, but they were probably best known for their work within the Star Wars space. During the PS2 generation, they were given the keys to the Star Wars universe, where they essentially adapted a Battlefield-like game for the fanbase. Both of the Star Wars Battlefront games were and are great games with quality gameplay and a lot of fan service. These games allowed the player to live out their fantasies within all of the big Star Wars battles, whether they were on the ground or in space. But oddly enough, these games were not the first time that they made something within the Star Wars space. Before LucasArts gave them the keys for Battlefront, Pandemic was hired to make a video game that acted as a sequel to Episode 2 Attack of the Clones. While not as known or as grand as the Battlefront games, this short and sweet action game is worth checking out. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you my review for Star Wars: The Clone Wars. The Clone Wars is mainly focused on vehicle combat. You get to pilot a variety of different tanks, walkers, speeder bikes, and more. Each of them control differently and help to bring a variety to the gameplay. Some are better for short-range fighting, while others are more geared towards long-range combat. The vehicles themselves offer unique weapons and abilities depending on what you are using. The action is very arcadey, with plenty of explosions and even some nice pickups to enhance your weapons. You will spend a lot of your time in the Republic tank. While in the tank, you have lasers, missiles, a boost option, and you can strafe to avoid enemy shots. No matter which vehicle you are in, your lasers will never run out, but you do have a limited amount of missiles. These cause the most damage, and you can pick up more on the battlefield. You can also use a zoom option for ranged combat. When it comes to your life, you have a health bar and shields. The shields will regenerate over time as long as you don't take any damage, and you need to rely on pickups for more health to restore your armor. When it comes to the shooting, it operates with a heavy auto-aim. The game will lock on to whoever is in front of you. The game rarely requires you to be very precise with your shots. It's more like hitting whatever you come across, and you don't really need to worry about specific weak points to your enemies. Just keep holding down the fire button and occasionally throwing out a missile or two. This results in a very simplistic yet enjoyable shooting gameplay. The sound effects are all solid, as many of them are taken from the films, and the missiles and special weapons have the best effects. My favorite part about destroying the enemy vehicles are all the explosions you will get to witness, along with some of them spinning out of control before they blow up. Now, while the Republic tank is what you will spend most of your time in, there are other vehicles that you will get to pilot. There are other ground vehicles that you will get to use. One of these is the iconic speeder bike. These parts are really fun and they act as these nice set pieces. The developers did a good job at capturing the speed of these vehicles, and it makes you feel like you are experiencing the same sequence from Return of the Jedi. Besides the tank, my favorite ground vehicle is the Walker. This is a lot slower, but the trade-off is that it's a lot more powerful. The Walker can fire off mortar shots with decent splash damage, along with turning on a reflective shield. Their lasers also have a longer range than the tank. With this being a slower but more powerful vehicle, you need to remember that you cannot quickly escape a bad situation like in the tank because you won't have access to a boost. There are other smaller vehicles like riding an animal with blasters that are pretty fun as well. Some of my favorite sequences in the game are the gunship sections. The gunship is the only air vehicle that you have access to, and it has some of the best parts in the game. The gunship has powerful lasers and missiles, along with the option to use homing green lasers that destroy most enemies instantly. The gunship sections deliver on this awesome power fantasy. The only downside is you will need to play with inverted controls. The trade-off is that you will never need to do any fast maneuvering, and you are essentially a slow tank, but you can fly. So even if you do not like the inverted controls, you will slowly get used to them for these parts. Along with this, the gunship sequences provide you with an excellent sense of scale for those bigger Star Wars battles. The last piece of gameplay variety are the lightsaber sections. There are these short sections where you will be playing as a Jedi and can slash at droids. There is some fun in these sections, but the controls are not as smooth as the rest of the game. Controlling the Jedis can be really clunky as you simply just try to turn. You can perform some basic combos along with being able to throw your lightsaber and use force push. These sections honestly feel thrown together and lack the polish and fun found in the other areas. Thankfully, these sections are rather short and do not pop up that often. One thing that I did enjoy about the level design is how the game has these levels dedicated to just one vehicle for the entire stage, and then there will be these stages that will have you switching between different vehicles. These levels can really breathe some more life into the game as you start the level in a tank and then switch to a walker halfway through. The missions themselves are pretty simple. Generally, you need to go and blow something up. To mix some things up, you will need to blow up specific buildings or help guard an allied convoy. There are even bonus objectives to complete that contribute to in-game rewards like new multiplayer maps and other extras. There are some boss fights thrown in as well. Most of the fights feature you against hard enemies that require more firepower to take down. From a design side of things, they are not that much different from normal fights except for the final boss encounter. The final boss is the most unique out of the bunch. Here you need to contend with this big enemy, smaller foes, and then sequences where you need to race away from an energy beam. This isn't the most interesting stuff, but it does help to provide some more variety. When it comes to the minute-to-minute action, the game is a solid arcade action game. There are even some fun pickups that will provide you with super lasers or ones that will allow you to not take any damage for a limited period of time. The Clone Wars is really easy to pick up and play with solid action. In many of the later levels, the game will throw a lot of enemies at you, and this helps to bring that appropriate amount of scale to the encounters. The gunship sequences are among the best in the game and are a nice power trip. I also really like the game's approach to how it simply isn't a movie tie-in game, but rather operates as a sequel to Attack of the Clones. The opening missions are pretty cool since you get to play as Mace Windu as he is leading the clone army to try and rescue Obi-Wan and Anakin. This allows the player to see the action sequences from the film but from a different perspective, and with this game not being a movie tie-in game, it allows the developers more freedom in how they approach the levels. There's even a fun level that acts as a nice tribute to the evacuation of Hoth. The Clone Wars is a very enjoyable game, and one that I had a few issues with. For one, I felt like it was a missed opportunity to not have segments where we could pilot the Jedi starfighters. They are shown in the cutscenes shooting at enemies, but these could have been fun little action bits rather than cutscenes. My one main issue is how allies will sometimes get in your way and cause you to accidentally damage them, or they will simply just fly right into you. This can be really annoying during missions where you need to protect a certain target and they keep going into your line of fire. And again, the clunky lightsaber combat needed a lot more refinement because that is easily the weakest area of the game. When it comes to the story, it is just a serviceable tale rather than being something that you're going to be invested in. The main narrative really kicks off after the first few missions when you are trying to stop Dooku from using this ancient Sith weapon. The best parts about the story are the cutscenes, especially when they are showing off the different ships. The voice acting is not that great and the sound alike for Anakin is awful, but the story moments are rather short and do not get in the way of the action. Outside of the short and sweet campaign, you have the local multiplayer options that you can enjoy with a friend. Sadly, you cannot play any of these in single player as there are no bot options, but there are some fun survival type modes that can provide you with some quick fun. The Clone Wars is a short and sweet experience that feels a bit like it was inspired by the Rogue Squadron games. It does lack some of the polish of those games, but like I said, there's a charm here with this fun game. It is easy to get into and lasts about as long as it should, considering its mechanics, and the ride is pretty awesome. Pandemic Studios was always a developer that I could rely on for quality fun, and during this generation there were many Star Wars games inspired by the prequel films that were really good, and I feel like this resulted in this one getting overlooked by some of the bigger games. While the Clone Wars may not be as expansive as the Battlefront games, it does provide solid arcade action. The land vehicles were a lot of fun, from the tank to the walker. Each of the different vehicles provided a slightly different experience, and the gunship is the best experience of player empowerment. I would have loved a mode where you can only play as the gunship, since it is really satisfying to blow everything up with it. This game is a good example of a solid weekend rental. You can pick this up, check your brain at the door, and enjoy a relaxing and action-packed ride from beginning to end. I highly recommend you check this one out if you haven't played it, and thank you very much for watching.